You found your way to the Winning Tactics podcast with host Adam Sinkus. Adam discusses winning tactics with small business owners and entrepreneurs, uncovering processes and introducing the tools and solutions for enhancing the bottom line. Thanks again for finding your way to the Winning Tactics podcast, and now your host, Adam Sinkus.
Good afternoon. Happy Tuesday. I can't believe we are already to the last week of February. This year seems to be flying by, just like all years seem to do that for some odd reason. But excited to be here today again for another wonderful episode of the Winning Tactics podcast. And I'm excited to bring friend and colleague Brandon Lee to the stage with me today. Brandon is going to give us the what's what about the new modern sales cycle today. So Brandon, welcome to the show. First of all, glad to have you on. Appreciate you taking some time to spend with us this evening. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
You got it. Well, Adam, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and with your audience. I am the founder of a company called FunnelAmplified. And if you think about a company's funnel that they have with their main website, what we do is amplify that by really recreating a lot of those lead generation activities in a digital space. But we do it for individual sales reps, C-suite, whoever it may be in the company that needs that type of activity.
Absolutely fantastic. Again, so glad to have you here. Sales is not something we have talked about a whole lot in the last year that we've had the Winning Tactics podcast running. So let's dive into it because, especially with all of what happened last year, sales is a totally different game now. Tell us a little bit about, what does modern sales kind of start to look like now?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a huge question, right? I mean, modern sales. Hey, look, I think we could really break it down to this: is that and you can see I got gray in my beard. I've been around for a while. When I first started in sales, back in the '90s, we had one real awesome asset that helped us open doors and get conversations, and it was information. We held information that a lot of our buyers didn't have because we didn't have the interwebs, right? We didn't have the internet that let us Google and find and everything that we need. We didn't have social media that allowed us to be connected to people. So one of the biggest changes over the last, I'm gonna call it 25 years, is that the power has shifted. Buyers don't need us for information. They've got information coming out their ears. They have more information they know what to do with. So using just information, I have something new. Do you want a demo? Can we talk about this? It just doesn't work where it used to work because we had information.
Yeah, I think anytime that I'm on the hunt for a new product, a new service, I have pretty much done so much research by the time I actually have figured out what time I'm going to spend with somebody. That I don't need a whole lot of information. I need usually the nuts and bolts of, what makes your product different and how much is this going to cost me?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. I'm going to reverse it on you here and ask you questions. Why is that? Right? Why do you have all your research done before you want to talk to somebody?
Because for me, it's, I think, first of all, like you mentioned, the information is available. It's there. Mm-hmm. It's easy to get a hold of. I can Google search most anything and mm-hmm. Google search people and find out reputation. So I like to make sure that I'm using the most of my time, right? And so to sit on 15 sales calls with people that have 2 and 3 star ratings and terrible customer service and don't have a product that really fits what I'm looking for, seems like a waste. I can a lot of times very quickly just filter those people out and get down to maybe the 2 or 3 people that I actually really want to talk to, because their product, their service, or they themselves are that great connector to what I need.
Yeah, perfect. Well, let me ask you this question again. You said you narrow it down to the 2 to 3. How do you discover who those 2 to 3 are? What are some of the tactics that you use to narrow it down to those 2 or 3? You already said Google search.
Yep.
Okay.
Google search.
What else?
I look at either Yelp, Better Business Bureau, or Google reviews to look at. Honestly, I typically will pretty much cut a company out if they have less than 3 stars.
Okay.
So that's kind of a non-negotiable for me. That's a pretty good indication that I'm not going to get what I expect out of them. And then I use my LinkedIn network probably more than a lot of people do, but it's become hugely powerful, especially in the services space, to just connect me with people that they've already worked with, in spaces like that. And then I think like everybody, price is always important.
Yeah, so I want to illustrate one of those. So we all know Google. We all know we can Google and find, and building businesses, there's a whole set of activities around SEO and search advertising and all that. And I love it. It's important. We're not talking about that today, though. The other thing you said is 2 things. You said LinkedIn, because you go to your network, and you said price. I don't want to talk about price right now. Let's just talk about this concept of going to LinkedIn and using that. And I would expect, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there's a couple things that you do. One is you think, who am I already connected to that I know that would have information about this need that I have? Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then you would also think, who do I know that would know somebody who may have bought this product before that I could ask them for a referral?
Yep.
Right?
100%.
So, got it. So if I'm looking as a business owner and take those 3 categories that you said, you got Google search, you got LinkedIn, which is personal network in a digital manner. Like us, we've never met in real life, but we've been on multiple Zooms, phone calls, all of that over the last several years. And then you got price, which I'm going to leave out here because that's a whole product strategy conversation. The amount of value that is inside LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, anything social, for us as small businesses is huge because of what you just said. And the term that I use is we socialize our search. Now, let me give you an example, and it's kind of a silly one, but I think it'll illustrate what I'm talking about. My wife called me one day, and this is probably a year and a half ago. And the gentleman who had a small company that did our landscape for our house, he was an older gentleman, and he didn't show up. And my wife's like, what do I do? And we can't get him to respond. Well, his wife ended up calling and said he got sick and he's shutting down the company. He's not doing it anymore. My wife said, who should I call? Right. And I said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you go into, we've got on our Facebook, in Facebook, we have a page that's like for our county and our neighborhood. And I said, well, why don't you go in there? And I kind of played this out because I wanted it as this type of story. I said, well, honey, what do you think you're going to do? She's like, well, I guess I'll Google it and I'll go and, probably fill out a few forms and wait for people to call me. And she's like, I've done this before and most of them don't ever call. So it's kind of a pain in the butt. I said, great. So why don't you go do this and put it in there and see what kind of feedback you get? What do you think happened? Right.
Well, I'm just going to go out on a limb here, but you found a stellar replacement, a stellar landscaper to help you out.
Yeah. But before that, what's cool for all of us to think about as business owners, she went in and said, hey, we live in this neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. Our guy shut down. Who do you know? Who do you recommend? And what she got was, right? It was just a ton of people making comments and doing things. Nice. Why did they do that? Well, the person that they referred was probably someone that they used, but they were also top of mind, right? They had a relationship with them, not just in real life, if you will. And by the way, I call this real life now. Like
Yeah.
what we're doing is real life. It's real to me. It's real to you. It's real to everybody watching us. This is real life. It just happens to be in front of a screen. So they have a relationship with that person. And it was very convenient right in front of them to go, oh, I recommend so-and-so. And in the process of doing that, what happened is one of these service providers actually saw it. His company was tagged, saw it, messaged my wife and said, hey, Megan, I do this house in your neighborhood. I'm actually going to be in your neighborhood tomorrow. What I'd like to do is come do your yard for free. And at the end of it, if you like it, we can talk about price. Right? No brainer. Absolute no brainer for my wife. It made it super easy for her. She didn't do Google searches. She socialized her search and got this response. So now, what does that mean for us as salespeople, right? We've got to get into buyer's circle of trust. My wife, by socializing that search, trusted what her neighbors told her. She immediately put herself into that company's trust, or brought that company into her circle of trust through a referral from somebody that she doesn't even know. She just knows they live in our neighborhood.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. Neighborhood groups, especially if your business is focused local, is like probably hands down some of the best time you can spend on social media.
And let's take, if you're not local, let's just extend this, because there are groups for everything.
Oh,
this one just happened to be geographically designed, right? But there's LinkedIn groups, there's Facebook groups for everything. So if you are utilizing that type of group environment to help further your brand, further your own influence and reputation, there's huge opportunities in there. And the reality is that over the last 25 years, buyers control their buying journey now. Like, we don't have, as salespeople, we don't influence it unless they allow us to influence it. And that's what I mean by getting into the buyer circle of trust. We have to be invited. And the other reality with that is that buyers, and we're all buyers, we're all sellers, we're all buyers. But as buyers, we also have a lot of tools that keep people out of our circle, right? I get messages on LinkedIn all the time, like, hey, you want to connect? I'm like, hey, you're going to try and sell me something, right? So we can disconnect from people. We can unfollow people. We can unsubscribe. I've got, caller ID, so I don't take calls from people I don't know. I send them to voicemail. I have a spam feature on my phone, so telemarketers, get hung up on. We have tools to keep people out, which means as sellers, as business owners, we need to do the things that get us invited in. And we can talk a little bit about that too, if you want.
That's perfect. Yeah, that segues right in. Before we jump into that, I do need to thank my affiliate partner, Cowork Hub Virtual. They are giving consultants, coaches, freelancers, and solopreneurs a sense of place in a remote work world. This is such a cool platform. It is a totally virtual co-working space. So it's all online. You can sign on from, hopefully, if your Starbucks is starting to open, your favorite Starbucks, or your office, your dining room, wherever you have an internet connection, and get back to having water cooler chat in a community-based space. You get your own private office, video conferencing. Absolutely fantastic resource. Check them out, coworkhubvirtual.com. There's a form you can fill out there if you want to schedule your private tour. All right, we'll jump back in. We talked quite a bit about how modern buyers have control and starting to unlock that buyer's circle of trust. Let's jump into the sales process a little bit, because I think as the modern buyer takes more control, as from a sales perspective, we have to approach the steps we take to get in there a bit differently. It's gone past knocking on doors and saying, "Hey, would you like to buy this wonderful vacuum we have?"
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the modern version of that is a LinkedIn message or even an email that just comes to you out of the blue that says basically, "Hey, we've got this great solution. We've been helping companies. Do you got 15 minutes for a demo?" It's like delete, unsubscribe. That's what we do.
Yep.
So before we talk about what we can do, what I'd like to illustrate a little bit more is that the data against using traditional methods to sell is just not good, right? I mean, Gartner came out, and these were 2019. This is 2019 data. I haven't looked at 2020 data yet, which I'm sure is even worse, but 54% of sales reps don't meet or exceed their quota. That means that over half of our sales expenditure is not returning what we hope it would return, right? And then to your point of what you said earlier about doing all the research yourself, is that when asked, buyers ranked sellers or sales reps number 9 in their top resources they would go to get information to make a buying decision. Number 9. If sales reps are number 9, why in the world are we putting so much money and putting more butts in seats to try and close deals? Buyers are saying, we're not talking to them. But this is what's interesting is the data also said that 90% of buyers said they would talk to a sales rep early in their buying process if they brought value in helping them solve their challenge. And that's a huge distinction because most salespeople don't approach buyers that way. They approach buyers with, do you want to buy this vacuum? You got 15 minutes for a demo. And there's a huge, huge distinction. And it's because, I'm sorry, go ahead. It was like, you got to say something in there.
No, I was to say, I love this because I get inundated with these messages all the time. Hey, we're selling SEO and marketing. Well, that's what I do. So,
Right.
I don't need your SEO and marketing.
I got a message today that said, we help franchises all over the United States, just like yours. And I'm like, you don't even have good data. I don't own a franchise. Like, come on. How are you going to get my trust and get me to want to talk to you when you don't even know who I am? Your data's bad. But here's what buyers are doing. And you had mentioned this earlier. So buyers want anonymous content to do their own research, right? They want pressure-free research. But if they do talk to people, what they're looking for is relationships. Like we've moved, if you think about the eras of selling and the decades, like the 2000s, we're all about SEO era, right? It was the www. That was a big deal to have your own www, right? It was website, drive people to the website. And then and that was like 90s into the 2000s. And then it started moving in the 2000s into the email era. Then it was get everybody's email address and stick them in your newsletter and just blast the crap out of everybody, right? And we started getting tired of that. I mean, we have, like on my iPhone now, I can look at an email and right at the top, they give me a button that says unsubscribe. So they make it really easy for us to get out of people's newsletters. And then we went into the inbound and the social era. And that was more of like, hey, get this free PDF, but give me your email address. And we did it because we were getting information and we got on their database. And then there was like, boo, 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 like, because they assumed if we downloaded this, I was ready to buy.
Yep.
Well, most of us were downloading it to read. We might be interested or we're still doing research. We don't know. But then we get into these phone calls and emails to buy. And it gives buyers a bad experience to the point that even when they're ready, they may not call your company because you just bugged the hell out of them the first time around. I believe we're moving back into a relationship-centric era. And it's going to look differently because we've grown up digitally, but we're back to relationships. And what that means is that as buyers want information, they want pressure-free, they want relationships, they want subject matter experts that are going to help them solve their problems and they look to their peers or they look to current vendors for information on who should I talk to. As business owners, if we're not consistently being out there, and I can explain what I mean by that, if we're not using content, we're not using social, we're not consistent with our emails, if we're not doing that information, and yes, I know there's a little bit of a double-edged sword there because we got sick of emails, but if your message is focused, you're adding value to your customers, they're not going to get rid of you, right? Unless they just don't need you anymore. I changed my jobs. I don't need this. I'm going to unsubscribe. Well, you don't want to be in front of them anyways. You don't want to waste that space. But if you're not in the interwebs, you're not in front of people, you're not there a lot, people are going to forget you, and you don't have the opportunity to get those referrals like my wife got and hired this person within 24 hours and didn't do any other comparisons. Trusted somebody's opinion and said, yeah, let's do it. You made this super easy for me. It solves my problem. Let's move forward. That was with the landscaper, but I will argue, and I've seen that happens with $100,000 purchases because we're busy people. And if I know Adam and I trust Adam and I go, Adam, I got to do this. What do you recommend? And you tell me, or I see somebody engaging with you on LinkedIn and I click and I look and there's somebody that offers something that I'm looking to buy and I can see a bunch of their content and how they've engaged and have online conversations. Guess what? I feel like I have somewhat of a relationship with them and I'm going to go to them because for me and for a lot more people these days, it beats going doing a Google search and starting from scratch.
Yeah, no, I love the social media thing. I'm hugely passionate about that. And we've had several back and forths on LinkedIn. But you know, it floors me that people still try and push these like really salesy messages, right? And don't provide any kind of value to the community that they're connected to. And it's like, I just can't fathom how you can't be in that space these days, because I know I'm not alone in the fact that I give those folks, you know, very much the cold shoulder and sometimes a not so nice message because they just frustrate me in sheer volume.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we have to humanize our companies. We would never imagine dehumanizing our company when we're face to face with somebody. It just doesn't make any sense. But here's the example I give. Adam, you're one of my prospects. I want to take you out for dinner and get to know you. So I show up or we meet at a restaurant, we sit down, we sit at the table. Do I sit there and go, so, and I go right into my sales pitch? Absolutely not.
No.
I mean, you would just be like, what the hell did I get myself into? Right? Who is this guy? But yet it's totally okay for some people to take nothing but business-oriented messages and just boom, 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 into LinkedIn, into Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be. We're still human. We have a screen in front of us, but we're still human. And we have to humanize that relationship building, because if not, other humans aren't going to connect.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? For me, I use LinkedIn. I talk about my business. I talk about my family. I talk about my hobbies. I talk about other stuff because I want people to know that I'm a human and I see them as a human, right? And most of my content, less than 5%, 5 to 10% of our content is around our like product. Most of what we share is about the industry. I talk like this, like I'm not pushing my products. I love talking about this stuff. Let's talk about it. But generally what will happen is somebody will resonate with what I'm saying. We'll connect on LinkedIn, we'll chat, we'll do whatever. And then somewhere down the road, they come to me or I go to them or they refer someone to me and I refer someone to them. And it's just the way modern business works. But we have to be strategic about the way we show up in this new real life version behind a screen.
Yeah, I've had a few people on talking about LinkedIn and social media and how that all shapes, right? And messaging is so important there. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Talking about your product in social media doesn't really work.
Yeah.
But talking about industry, talking about giving away tips and tricks, all that kind of stuff, I think talks about, building value in that relationship,
Yeah.
even into how you connect with somebody, right?
Oh yeah.
And you do the same thing that I do, is, that just that personalized 1 or 2 sentence message when you connect with somebody, can go a long way as well. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, if we take real life, or what we used to call real life, and we apply it to digital, which is the new real life. Look, I named this thing just because I'm not very smart. And if I don't name something and build it as a model, I forget it. So I called it the infinity loop of relationship building. Really lame name, I get it. But if you think about the infinity loop that goes like this, right? All of our relationships, and constantly we should be doing this to build relationships, because business happens human to human in relationships. But it starts with content. In a digital manner, it's called content. Now, there's a couple types of content, in my opinion, and you can talk about different mediums of video and and all that type of stuff, infographics and pictures and all that. It's all content. For me, there's content that we post, and there's content that we engage. Right? All of those lead to content creates conversations, which is much like the way we met. You start having conversations. You post, somebody posts, and you go comment on it. You post and they comment on it. Those conversations build into a relationship. And then through that relationship is where you have opportunities. So this infinity loop of relationship building, for me, it's content, conversations, relationships, and opportunities. And you just keep it going. But you have to do it by creating content and engaging with people. And that's one of the best ways to get invited into people's circle of trust. Just be human, talk, engage, don't sell, add value, offer information. It's
yeah.
really not that difficult.
No, ultimately it's getting back to, a handshake and a how you doing.
Right.
That's the modern version of that, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
let's shift gears one last time here, because I think it's important. We've talked a lot about where the buyers sit in the sales cycle and how we need to adjust our sales process to really, attack, and I shouldn't say attack, but really engage buyers and build into that buyer circle of trust. But what are some of those strategies once we've got into that circle to really push and close that sale?
Mhm. Yeah, so that's great. So outside of just pure sales strategy, getting commitments once you're in a sales conversation, I think the number one thing that I recommend, and my team, we talk about this all the time, you got to block off time every day in your calendar to go engage with people. So very simple. You have your top 50 list who you're targeting that you want to build a relationship with. And I hate the word target. It sounds so military to me, but you got your top 50 list, and quite simply, you go through your top 50 and you go engage with them a couple times a week. What does
Yeah.
that look like? Well, if they're posting, respond to what they post. Be authentic. Don't just post something to oh, I'm here. But the other thing you could do is, if they're not posting, is then you see what other people are posting that would add value to them, and you comment and you tag them and say, I'd love to hear what you think about this, or tag them and say, I thought this would be valuable for you. It's just having conversations. So I think having your top whatever 10, 50, 100 list, blocking off time in your calendar as a sales activity to go and engage with them online.
Yeah, I love that, and I want to add to that, because I one thing that I think a lot of small business owners miss on that is meet them where they're at. So if they're a LinkedIn person, meet them in LinkedIn. Don't expect
Right.
them to gauge you in LinkedIn. If they're a Facebook person,
Right.
find where your customers are at. I
Yep.
always get so frustrated with like the Gary V content theory that you need to post 1,000 times a day on 600 different platforms. And I'm like, yes, most small business owners don't have that time.
Yeah.
So pick the one or
And
two where your customers are at.
yeah, and I think there's a balance too, right? It's pick the one or two where your customers are at. But one of the things that I recommend to people is choose the one that you enjoy being on,
Yeah.
because you're going to spend a lot of time there anyway. So, I'm primarily LinkedIn and Facebook, and I'm really the same on both platforms. I mean, I talk a little less about my family on LinkedIn. And you know, I don't go into my newsfeed and just blast business stuff, but I'm the same person and I want to show up the same way. Those are the two that I like to use the most. And so I find most of my audience there. Oh, you said something, I thought of something I wanted to share and I totally forgot it now. Oh well, it'll come back to me.
Yeah. So what are some of those other strategies, right? I think a lot of people struggle, and I know I personally struggle with this. It's that shift from relationship to really starting to talk the sale conversation up
Yeah.
and get to that point. So what are some
Yeah.
strategies to shift that?
Yeah. So, I think that one thing that we use is a lot of information that get people to come to us. And my goal is to get people to look to me more like a doctor than a salesperson. Why is that? Well, when you go to a doctor, you generally say, "What do I do? I need your help. My shoulder hurts. What do I do?" And they prescribe something to us. And we generally listen to them, right? I mean, there's
Mhm.
obviously cases you get second opinion and all that, but let's just simplify things for a second. We generally listen to them because they're the experts and they're giving us a prescription. When we're seen as a salesperson, and please correct me, anybody, if you think I'm wrong, but for me, if I'm on the other side, if I'm a buyer and the person on the other side is a salesperson, I see them as a salesperson, they're acting like a salesperson, I'm not buying what they're selling me. I'm generally going to buy something a little bit less if I am buying because I think that they're trying to oversell me. I'm not looking at them like a doctor that says, "You're going to solve my problem." You're probably going to, help me solve my problem, but how do I know you're really giving me what I want? And there's just a psychological thing there that you may not totally be able to quantify it. But I will reference SAP did a study internally, and they changed the name on it. It used to be social selling, and I just keep calling it their digital relationship building program. They spent 5 years with the team internally that everybody volunteered that said, "Yeah, I want to be trained in this." And they were trained on how to use LinkedIn and digital ways to build relationships as salespeople. And you had other people that opted out; they didn't want to do it, and they just kept doing their old, their way of doing their sales. Well, at the end of 5 years, what they found is the people that were doing this digital relationship building strategy, they were 90% more likely to meet or exceed quota than people that were doing it in the old style, if you will. And then the other piece of data, which I actually thought was even better, and I thought this spoke more to the value of building relationships instead of selling. The digital relationship builders had an average deal size that was 300% larger than their counterparts. I asked the question, of course, why? Right? And the answer was, well, because they had this relationship, because they were seen as a thought leader, because they were seen as a subject matter expert, people came to them and said, "What do I need to do to solve this problem?" Versus, "I have this problem. What do you guys have?" It's a
Yeah.
huge, huge difference. So, what you're asking is tactically what we do. And I think number one is that engagement side. I think number two is you really have got to be a content creator. I mean, it you just don't have an option. If you're building a company, you need to be a content creator. You need to be very strategic about the content you create. It can't be buy my stuff, buy my stuff. It can't be all product oriented. But if you're passionate about your product, you can be passionate about all the things around it, right? Those are the things that you want to talk about, and create content. Create content, create content, create content. Now, most people go, oh, they get, the eyes gloss over and they go, oh my gosh, I don't have a budget. I don't have this. Look, I get that. Do what you can, do what you need to do. Turn on your camera, talk. You don't need to have a perfect backdrop. You don't need to have perfect lighting. It doesn't have to be perfectly edited. Just start talking. If you're a writer, write. If you're more graphically inclined, create graphics. Do what resonates well with you, but create content.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I look at my own personal journey on LinkedIn and I go, gosh, I was really terrible at writing at the beginning, but now I look at the quality of content I put out comparatively, and like just practice makes it easier. Just taking the action and doing it, learning, learning over time what people like, what people don't like, and is it's an easy lesson to learn, and people aren't that critical. At the end of the day, people are not that critical in that space.
Well, and even if they are, who cares? I mean, let me tell you this story. This was back in 2014, and I decided I was going to blog, right? I'm like, okay, I got to create content. So I had sold a company, and I was kind of a solo guy at the time, trying to figure out what I was going to be when I grew up. And so I worked my butt off and get my WordPress site and all that stuff, and did really bad graphics and all that stuff. And I had a database that was pretty small. It was just my personal network of people. And I wrote this blog, and I was so excited. And I even created a graphic for social media to promote it and all that, right? And I published it, and then I went to social media and I shared it, and I waited. It was crickets. I mean, it's just crickets. And of course, all my insecurities, right? Oh my gosh, no, nobody's reading it. Nobody cares. And I'll be honest, I had just sold a company a couple years before. I was a little arrogant. I think, I was kind of expecting like, hey, I've done some good things. You guys should listen to me. But crickets. And then, it took a couple of hours, but I got an email, and it was from, a friend, right? It was an acquaintance. And the subject line said, about your blog. And I was like, so excited, right? And I opened it up, and it said, if you're going to blog, I thought you probably should do it correctly. He had taken my blog article, copied it, pasted it into a Word doc, and then edited it. And when you track changes and you got red marks all over, that was it. And I thought, oh my gosh, no way, right? And what do you think I did? Delete. I was mortified. I was like, oh my gosh. But take my story and look at the other way. You can't do what I did. You can't let that happen to you, because I guarantee this, when you start creating content, the first people that show up are the trolls. The first people that show up are the naysayers or the negative people. And some of them, they do it from a good place in their heart. They think they're helping you. But what it does is it knocks our confidence. It throws us off our game. And then it took me over 6 months to write another blog article. But the name of the game right now is content, because the infinity loop of relationship building, content creates conversations. You got to create content, and you got to engage with people, or else you don't have conversations. You don't have conversations, you don't have relationships. Without relationships, you don't have opportunities. You don't have influence. And influence is what we need to grow our companies.
Absolutely fantastic advice there. I love it. We're going to wrap the show up. We're getting to, we've been chatty, and I've enjoyed this conversation, but so we're running a little bit longer than.
Did I talk too much? I did, didn't I?
No. It's been fantastic. I've been listening and loving it. So I'm going to school today. But I always like to wrap up my shows with some final thoughts. Just a quick thing that people can take and easily apply to their business and see some results from. So I leave the floor to you for your final thoughts.
Oh, it's for me for final thoughts. Oh, I was so excited to hear what you were going to wrap this up with. Hey, look, when it comes to the buyer circle of trust, it really is the core of growing our businesses. We need to have more credibility. We need to be invited in. We've got to remember that buyers have more power than they've ever had before, and we have to earn the right to be invited into conversations with them. And we don't do that by being salesy. We do that by adding value. We do that by being seen as an expert. We do that by being seen as a subject matter expert, a trusted advisor, whatever the right term is for your industry. You need to be seen as an advisor. And the bottom line is, if you want somebody to see you as a trusted advisor, you have to give trusted advice. And that means content.
Fantastic. Great final thoughts there. Man, you've dropped like so many gold nuggets in here, things that I am going to like be personally like playing this back 65 times and writing an extreme amount of notes for.
Well, you must have taken that from if I talk or I do Zooms or whatever, usually I start with like, hey, that we're gold digging. Right. Gold digging, especially now that they have those TV shows about them digging for gold in Alaska, right? It's cold, it's dirty, it's a lot of work. They spend a lot of time without any value, without finding any gold. But when they find that gold, it's just a little tiny piece, right? But it's worth a lot of money.
Yep.
When we're listening to people, we're reading content, we're doing whatever, it means you're just looking for that one little piece of gold, and then just apply one thing. Just take one thing and start applying it.
Yep. Absolutely love it. I want to give you a chance to tell people where they can find you and what they can find you for.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, hey, look, I like to actually turn around and tell everybody, follow Winning Tactics, follow Adam, listen to what he's doing, what he's saying. I learned a lot with Adam when we first talked. It's been over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, about what you were doing with LinkedIn, what you were doing with your local customers, your clients that you were serving. I think that's great. Anybody wants to find me, you can find me. It's Brandon Lee on LinkedIn. My personal website is brandonlee.me, and FunnelAmplified.com is my business. So Adam, thanks so much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
No, I really appreciate it and glad to have you on the show. Thank you so much for those that tuned into the live show. And as always, you can catch the replays on Thursdays on all the podcast networks as well as YouTube. Thank you so much and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Well, that wraps up yet another episode of the Winning Tactics Podcast. You can find Adam on both the LinkedIn and Facebook platforms. And to support the show and ensure the success of the podcast, would you kindly consider visiting Patreon.com/Adam Sinkus? We greatly appreciate it. And until next time, from the Winning Tactics Podcast, remember, culture is how your team behaves when no one is looking. Take good care, and thanks for listening.